So I think it's a very exciting conference, right? The invisible UI. I think Ohm nailed a very interesting aspect to it, because one of the frustrations, I'm not an analyst for most of my life, but I used to build software, and one of the most frustrating things building software is when you didn't win the deal and people said, yeah, you had the same functionality, but the users liked the UI a little better. And then, of course, you want to say, what was better? Right? Tell me what was better. And say, it was the colors, or it was something there. So the interesting thing is, we intuitively know if a UI is good or bad. The best positive experience in my view was Mint. Anybody who knows Mint? It's a long time ago, right? But everybody liked to use Mint, right? It was addictive to put scary things, your personal financial information there, right? But it was easy to do, it was fun to do, and people did it. And then the flip side, there's not so great information, right? Is anybody here from LinkedIn? No? So my worst day-to-day operation is when I send somebody an unsolicited standard invitation on LinkedIn. Because LinkedIn's behavior is inconsistent, right? So my trial and error is if I'm on the profile page of someone, then I can edit as you should, right? The email saying, nice to meet you, and so on. But when you go on a list view and you hit there, it's an automated email, which is what I want to undo, but you can't undo it anymore, right? And then the other thing is, somebody told me I don't understand much from airplanes, we use them all the time, so you can never figure out if an airplane is in good shape. Yeah? But you can see if the blinds don't work, if the tables don't work. At the time when people used to smoke, the little ashtrays wouldn't close, then the airline was skimping on maintenance revenue, right? And to me, anybody from Twitter here? Anybody has noticed how inconsistent lists are on Twitter depending on the client? Some are alphabetically sorted, some are on the history how they are, some are ascending, some are descending. The OK button is there sometimes, to create a new one is the same button, the same place in different UI. Nobody has noticed? Well, then it's a personal issue. Okay, so we all feel strongly about design, obviously, so I'm very happy to have a great panel here. And if I get the names right, starting from the right, I have Christine Evans from Fitbit. Hi, Christine. Zia Yusuf from Streetline.
Yep.
Hi. Maeve O'Mara. Do I pronounce O'Mara right? Mm-hmm. Maeve, I practice. O'Mara, that's sure. From Castlight Health. And Tom Foremski from Silicon Valley Watch. Is that correct?
Yes.
So this is a great panel. Thank you for coming. So let's go to the person who's definitely the expert in this, the practitioner and the theoretical professor, even Zia, right?
What?
Yeah, that's what I saw in the intro, right? So definitely in one area which is very relevant for this, the Stanford Design Center, right?
Sure.
Where you have some roles. So what is your view and understanding of design thinking?
Look, I think that I'm not a designer by training at all. I kind of fell into this in starting the design team at SAP, and then got involved in with the Stanford Design School, and have been teaching there on the side for the last 6-7 years and so on. There's definitely way more cooler and more sophisticated designers at this conference than much more than I. But I think.
But who teaches in Stanford? Anybody here? Any colleagues of yours?
Yeah, it just shows you that anybody. It just shows you that anybody can.
Very modest.
No, but look, it's fascinating that design and the evolution of design. I mean, if you look at the people at this event, you've got obviously folks with the hardware stuff. You've got virtual reality. You've got Fitbit. I just met a whole bunch of people here from SAP that are still working there. It's become the norm, and I would say the leading criteria for building something. And from the Stanford side, obviously, there's a connection between IDEO and the Stanford D School, and it's been an incredible journey. At the first 3 years, I taught a course called Experiences in Software Design, which was with the founder of SAP, Hasso Plattner, and he and I, and this was back, 8-9 years ago. SAP software, and apologies for the 2-3 people in the room that are from SAP. It's very different now, so don't take it personally. But back then, I mean, it was a pain in the ass to use, right? And parts of it still is. And it's, how do you kind of change that 20,000 person engineering organization, and how do you kind of make all of those changes? So I think what Stanford has done is they just haven't limited the design discussions to design topics, but they've extended it to, there's a class, I do a class now on liberation technology, which is the use of mobile apps for economic development in slums outside Nairobi. Liberation, like liberty. Yes, liberation technology. And this was, one project there was in this Kibera and not Kibera, Matare outside Nairobi. if there's a fire in this area, the house is obviously burned down very quickly. There's no 911. Nobody's going to come to your aid. Besides the physical loss and maybe the human loss, one of the most important things people lost was their documents. Their driver's license and their passport unlikely, but their citizenship papers and so on and so forth. And so the students came up with a mechanism where you could go to this local soccer office and bring your document and have them scanned and upload it to a Google Drive and kept there for safekeeping, right? Now, it's those kinds of things that you start kind of using design for that just makes it fascinating. So that's I think Stanford is playing an important role, but there's a bunch of, you don't want to overplay it. There's a bunch of other institutions, but it's very...
Is that design or application?
Is there a difference?
Yeah.
How?
Well, one thing does something and one thing doesn't have to do anything.
So this is a good question. So I would, and then I'll shut up. I would disagree with that slightly, or maybe more than slightly, is the way the students came up with that problem. If you look at the design process of user-centered design, understanding the issue, the rapid prototyping, all of that stuff, and they looked at all kinds of complicated solutions of how do you store these documents, and then there was stuff around, well, do we buy everybody a safe? Do we do this? Do we do that? And so on and so forth. So I would say the application is just the tools and the manifestation of that design. The important part is the thinking and the process you go through to come up with that. So for me, it's not one or the other. It's design thinking. Design thinking is keeping that user-centered aspect in the middle, and this is what most companies that are not good at design just don't know how to do. And you can take Apple, you can take other companies where once the lead designer is the person that's making the primary decision on what gets built, you'll make different products. If it's the engineering team that decides what to build, we'll see what happens. So that was a long, rambling answer.
No, very interesting. Liberation technologies, liberation applications.
Liberation technology.
Very interesting. Maeve, you're trying to create a new category for software, enterprise health software, category software. What are you doing with applying design thinking to that?
Yeah, so for us, it's an interesting debate of design versus application. So we are trying to create the category of enterprise healthcare management, which effectively is trying to take healthcare spend from an uncontrollable cost, what people thought there's really nothing you can do here, to changing that into a strategic investment and business advantage. And in terms of kind of how we kind of got to this category, I think design actually played a big role because we started in transparency, which was really about aligning the interests of the employer and employee by giving them a platform to shop. And in order for that value prop to actually resonate with the enterprise, we needed people to actually use the application. So design was actually really critical because we did start selling to enterprises. That was our original business model in many ways because we needed to actually, in order to get the data to create our product, we needed to have scale, so that required enterprise. But in many ways, what made us a successful product or technology was that people actually used us, and that was entirely a function of creating a simple user-friendly experience to allow people to shop for something that they never thought was even possible to shop for.
Very interesting. And Christine, you didn't have the problem that you didn't have consumers, right? But you have a different challenge. You want to share that with us a little bit? Or?
Thank you. So I think many of you here are probably familiar with Fitbit. We have an experience.
Who is the Fitbit in the audience?
Anybody from here?
I've seen a Fitbit on your, which I've never seen, right?
I've never experienced Fitbit envy, but this is what I have.
I know the black is beautiful.
Called Fitbit envy.
I'll get you one. So,
but it looks like metal.
But it's a metal bangle, and there's a tracker that actually goes into it that can be swapped out with some of the rubber ones that we have from one of our models called the Fitbit Flex. So it's an entire experience, right? That's been built for the consumer, which is hardware, right? The firmware that's in it, which is an experience in itself, and the user experience that you have with our web platform as well as the mobile experience. What's been really interesting for us as we look at the enterprise is Fitbit is not a company that was created to go after the enterprise. The enterprise came to us. So about 4 years ago, we had heads of benefits, CEOs knocking down our door wanting to buy 15,000 units to distribute to people at the company to find a way to get them more engaged and being more active and healthier. So today, right, fast forward now 4 years now, we've started to build a number of dashboards behind it that help companies look at this from more of a population health management perspective and take a lot of, I think, the things that people love about a consumer product and help it to power their wellness programs.
Interesting. So
it sounds like a Big Brother bonus program or something.
You know, we hear a lot of that, particularly for Fitbit. They're all opt-in programs. There are a lot of legal requirements behind what employers can or cannot do. It is entirely up to the employer whether they want to participate in the program. And again, that is part of when we design the experience, how do we make the opt-in process as seamless as possible? So, for example, if you get your tracker through your corporate wellness program, we design an experience where you go to a custom store for your company, you order it, comes to you. As you go, if any of you have a Fitbit, you go through a pairing process, right? That connects it back to your username. One of the additional screens inserted in there is the opportunity to join that corporate wellness program because we've been able to recognize that serial number as one that belongs to that company. So I'm not going through another process to find an email, dig through 50 million papers that my benefits team gave me. It's seamlessly a part of that process that I'm going through as a Fitbit user. So again, opt-in processes, but we try to make them as seamless as possible.
But aren't we trained as consumers today that if we get something free, we give away all our rights? This is a fun.
That's it.
Right.
Very interesting. So.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. So, well, one of the things that I think is very interesting is we've tested out a number of different models where we require every employer, right, who brings Fitbit Wellness, which is our enterprise offering, to subsidize at least 25% of the cost of the tracker to the employee, right, which makes it more affordable for them. But what we encourage them to do is to make sure there's still some cost share there because it's a shared partnership between you and the company in achieving better outcomes. So it's not always for free. I guess I'll put it that way.
So your data is safe.
Your data's safe.
Tom, you've been covering trends in Silicon Valley longer than I can think of. How long?
Yeah, more than I have fingers and toes.
Okay, fingers and toes. Okay, excellent. So do you think this whole design thinking craze is just another bubble coming out of Silicon Valley? Well, do you compare it with the thing before, or is it something more substantial that's going to stay from your perspective?
Well, really, we're talking about user interface, how we interact with the world, and the world is a digital world. It's a computer somewhere there. When I grew up, we interacted with punch cards, which wasn't the best user interface. And then there was tape, also cassette tape for people who had hobbyist tendencies. And gradually it's gotten better and better and better. But it's been such a slow build. And just because we talk about design today and a company says, design is really important to us doesn't mean we're going to get good design. There's tons of bad design. I think Google Glass, for example, is bad design. Not only does it not look good, it's also bad social design. I mean, the way you take a picture of someone is you wink, for example. Now, that's terrible. So there's many aspects to design, and just because you say you're into design doesn't mean anything. When desktop publishing started, right? I remember that. Everybody was a designer all of a sudden. Everybody was using 20 typefaces per page, and everything looked terrible. But to those people, it looked great. So design by itself is meaningless.
It's all in the eye of the beholder, right? But I'm glad you mentioned punch cards. I forgot that in my intro, because the punch card UI was something very personal. Yeah, the business user would get his or her 52 punch cards for the year, would give them over to the IT guy, usually Friday afternoon, because during the week they would build something on their mainframe, hopefully with no error. And on Monday morning they would get the mistake, and the question would be, do you want your report, Christine, on your desk, or are you going to come by and pick it up with me? And then the biggest error in user handling happened, which some IT folks would put the punch card for the week to you, and you would mix up the punch card and give it to me again. Guess what you get next week? The same report, right? The same data. So not much user error in that whole model, but very personal from the delivery. From a learning perspective, what are the things, Maeve, that you've done at Castlight to change in the approach how you build software using design thinking?
Yeah, So I think that when we started, as I mentioned, it was around transparency, and a lot of that was educating users around basically the very simple concept of how to shop. And I think as we evolved, frankly, from an enterprise point of view, we realized that a lot of what our enterprise benefits leaders, customer and buyer, were looking for was to help influence behavior change and amplify kind of the right decision making. So we evolved into a little bit more of a guided design, and frankly, we're just really beginning now that we've as we've matured as a company, we've gotten a lot more data, which is enabling a lot more personalization that frankly just wasn't an option for us at the beginning. So our design is evolving to be much more personalized, and to kind of the aspect around invisible design, the connectivity aspect is really a huge piece for us as we've started to integrate a lot more partners and kind of make that ecosystem. So I would say we've gone from initially a lot of just kind of information presentation, and obviously the principles still were there around simplicity and comfort, and those have definitely held true. But now we're thinking about much more of kind of a personalized, guided experience, and using both the data and the partnerships to really influence kind of the overall user experience.
Interesting. So it also says something where Tom was saying, is it a user interface design, right? In one of the articles Ohm published around this, he was talking, I think he said it was on structure, that he's talked to Sonos CEO, forgot the name by heart, right? And he was saying like the real invention was to make it easy to connect the speakers to all kinds of media sources, right? It wasn't in the UI, right? It's something hidden, right? The whole question of the invisible design. Christine, from your experience, bring Fitbit to the enterprise. Any lessons learned in hardware, software?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, just from a consumer standpoint, that Fitbit made a bet on very early on was investment in Bluetooth Low Energy. Right, so one of the first companies to really make a big bet and to make sure that trackers could sync wirelessly in the background with no extra effort on the part of the user, right? So this stops you from having to do a lot of things, which is taking off the tracker, logging your steps manually, or uploading them into some Excel document. So there's one barrier that we've removed there. I think the other piece of invisible design that we've really started to approach very aggressively is the fact that there's no one-size-fits-all for activity tracking for anyone. So from a hardware perspective, we have trackers in many different form factors, many different colors. For example, so we just talked about this one here from Tory Burch, where you actually slip the tracker from the flex band into here, and most people don't know, right, that I'm walking around wearing a wearable tracking device. It makes it part of you. It makes it part of your personal experience versus being an extra gadget that you're wearing. Now, in terms of the enterprise, what this does for them is it makes it a motivating tool that anybody wants to wear versus something that your company is shoving down your throat. And I think just the ability for a company to bring that type of value to their employees, and then have what we produce on the back end, which are the dashboards, which are equally valuable to them, marrying that together has been great.
Very interesting. So when you apply this at a company like SAP here, which has not been known for great design, as you shared before. Right? It's a joke on the side, right? I'm German, as you can hear from my accent. As a German, you have two options, right? You can build the software or you use the software, right? I opted to build it twice. I had to use it in the process too. What changed that all of a sudden design thinking matters?
Yeah, and so I'll answer the kind of the broader enterprise software question because it actually is a very important one. The number of people that are impacted by enterprise software, the number of businesses and transactions and economies that depend on enterprise software, whether it's SAP, Oracle, HP, IBM, is massive, right? And we started this journey on the SAP side, where I started the design team. And here I think it's important to differentiate between design thinking, user experience, and design, okay? Design is kind of this catch-all phrase, right? I mean, you could be designing clothes, you could be designing, cars, and so on and so forth. Design thinking, and this goes back to the Stanford thing, and it was very much an aspect of SAP, is how do you change fundamentally the way SAP employees think about that customer experience? All the way from, obviously the use of the software, but in terms of the pricing of the software, how do you get the deals done? How do you, Fitbit obviously a great example, and their SaaS software is a great example of using those principles. So design thinking it's a process. It can be learned. there is an approach, whether you take the IDEO thing or the Stanford thing or something else, but it's looking at that whole user experience and designing for that. It's not just the user interface, right? I mean, for those of you who fly on Virgin America, you look at the user experience there versus on United, very different. You go to a Four Seasons and the experience that you get there versus somewhere else, it's not magic, but it really requires thought on what that user experience has been. The challenge at SAP was that when we started, and I'm going to ask David to comment on this in the back, so David, be ready for a sec. He's one of the SVPs that runs this stuff now. Is introducing this topic. Now, remember, this was like 8 years ago, and going to the German engineering team and saying, let's start thinking about user experience as the primary criteria for how we build the apps. Yeah. And obviously the pushback, and to this day in a lot of enterprise software companies, is, look, it's the engineering, it's the transaction stuff, it's how the stuff works, and if somebody doesn't understand it, we'll send them a manual. I mean, that literally was the answer, right? And going through, I had the head of SAP's design team visit me actually just 2 days ago when we were reminiscing a little bit. He's now the chief design officer. There's 450 people in that team. And when I started, it was nobody, and we built it up to 50, 60 person team. But it's taken an 8-year journey, right? It's an 8-year journey of how do you incorporate design thinking and the user experience in everything that a company does. And the older the company, the harder it is, because there's established norms, there's human beings that have built things a certain way, and I mean it's tough to do. It's much easier to do. That's why you have much more interesting designs for startups, because they're starting from scratch. They're using today's technology, and the training and the experience that the individuals that are going in have is very different than somebody that's been doing this for 30, 40 years.
I can't imagine what 50, 60 designers are doing all day long with SAP software.
You can't imagine? Okay, Dave, can you introduce yourself and tell us, if you don't mind?
No, of course not.
So just introduce yourself, and since I'm not there anymore, what the hell are 450 designers doing at SAP?
And how do you have time to be here and not design stuff?
It's because we have 449 other people back at the office. So
they're busy.
It's
Okay,
just 40
good.
or 50. It's 400.
450.
Yeah, and actually the big issue is that what we've come to realize with our customers is that there aren't enough designers in enterprises in general around the world. If you look at the ratio, it can be anywhere between one designer to 1,000 or 5,000 employees that are in an IT organization, and that's just simply not enough. So nowadays, it's a prerequisite. Amazon one click really set the standard that everybody wants super simplicity, right at one click.
Yep.
And the challenge with SAP software was there's all the features, functions, depth and breadth and sophistication for all the companies that we serve in the world, but it's delivered to everybody all at the same time. And everybody sees all that complexity. Now what we have to do is mask off that complexity for that individual user.
Right.
And that requires this whole design thinking approach. It requires premeditation. You've got to take your shoes off, put the other person's shoes on, walk in a few miles in their shoes, and understand it from their point of view.
Right.
So empathy for
Do
the
you use
user.
two-way mirrors to observe them?
Well, actually, it's going out into the world, working with our customers hand in hand, and doing design thinking exercises.
I mean, that, by the way, used to be the case, right? And I shut that down. There used to be a usability lab in Germany where you sat and looked at how people interacted with the software, and we shut that down, right? And had the people go out there. You're commenting on the 450 people. That's 450 people out of 80,000. I think it should be 5,000
Yeah, it's
people. The
completely
ratio is
insufficient.
way
I
off.
still don't know what they do.
Well, actually, what they're doing is they're going and sitting down with 25,000 engineers that we have across the globe and trying to explain to all of our wonderful German colleagues why design matters, right? The great thing about being an employee of SAP is that the German engineering is rock solid. It's deep, it's broad, it's comprehensive. But it was an afterthought, the user interface was, right? They went and served corporations and delivered value for the corporation, not worrying so much about the individual human being that's sitting down in the purchasing department or the HR department. And that has completely shifted, and it's been shifting over the last 5 to 10 years, and now it's an emergency state.
And today, I think, with,
I don't mean to be on this
No,
panel.
Thank you, Dennis.
I invited you.
No,
Thanks,
thank you,
man.
Dennis.
but it seems today design should be a lot easier because we're using the cloud. We can see how people are using an interface. I mean, in real time, we can track everything. We can track every single button and feature on that page. And that was very difficult back in those ERP days where you did have to, spy on people and see how they were using it because you couldn't get that kind of feedback. So today the design cycles, I would imagine, would be much faster reiteration, and we should get to where we want to go much quicker. But also, culture changes. These days, everything is large type, large words, large buttons. It's like we're all retards.
Flat.
We
Has to
can't
be
find
flat.
anything. So you've also got to be aware of the cultural changes as well.
Is it from your perspective is another fad where we're chasing a red herring enterprise software because it has to be functionally so rich, right? When SAP became market leader by automating the last corner of the enterprise, right? The kitchen sink in the auxiliary staffing department area.
I would say that the last corner is healthcare, but
Not when something happens, right? Not when something happens. Not when a live event happens or when you need it, right? Then it's not the last corner. This was a question for Thomas. Can you even do that? Or is it like a red herring?
I'm sorry, do what?
Can you even improve enterprise software usability if you have this broad part, right? It's nice to write an app. It's easy to write Win. What's your view?
I'm a half glass full kind of guy, except when it comes to beer. It's always half empty. I'm not sure if this is beer or if this is water. But of course, everything can be improved, and it has to be improved. And the cloud is going to force that improvement because no longer are you just an app sitting on somebody's computer somewhere. You're actually being used by people all over the world. It matters even more at that point. But also, you have a fantastic transparency into how they're using your product.
Right.
And we've never had that before. We've never had that real-time feedback. And we probably don't know how we should best use it right now.
So this is a good sample.
That's,
Yeah.
by the way,
Yeah,
absolutely
good.
true. If it is the case that it's cloud software everywhere,
Yeah.
but it's not, right? And what's happening right now with the design team there is that SAP's customers are asking for those designers to go sit with the customer. So this is like the GMs of the world and the ABBs and the GEs and
Right.
so on and so forth, and healthcare companies, etc. So there's a vast world out there that is not Silicon Valley.
Right.
It's not San
But
Francisco.
it can learn from the cloud-based
Of course.
software. Right?
That's why they need the
But
450 design.
here's my quick sample of the panel, and think about in the audience, right? Is design thinking water, which we're lucky enough in California, even Strouds, we have enough? Is it beer, which is like a 3-4 months production cycle? Or is it wine, which is like a 6-7 year production cycle? So you're still thinking about it, Tom?
Well,
You have more
SAP,
time?
I
You have
think
more
it's
time?
wine.
I think Zia said it's wine already, but we'll give him a chance. Maeve, is it water, beer, or wine, design thinking? How long does it take? How long does it take to get it done? Is it water like available from the tap? You just
Should
start it,
be
you get
beer.
going. Is
Should
it
be
beer,
beer.
3-4 months process when you want to make it, or is it wine where it's a 5-6 year
I mean, I don't
process?
want to cop out, but I think it's all
Yeah.
of the above because I think it's constantly. But I agree. I mean, I think that we have, I think that we are learning more and more, and it's interesting, particularly being enterprise, because I was thinking to myself, what was it like before you were SaaS? Because we do have customers who are constantly, because we have a monthly release cycle and are constantly pushing out new functionality, that then see that as an opportunity to request new functionality every month. So it's this interesting balance of, constantly incorporating the feedback from the actual users, but also that expectation of your product is evolving literally every month, and
Right.
being that as a kind of a competitive advantage.
Which is an interesting thing that enterprise software, which often monthly released 3-4 months, has actually overtaken consumer software, right? Because if we think how often I get an update on my Fitbit, I mean, I have not tracked it, right? But it's not more than 2-3 times a year for a
On your
substantial
on
one.
your firmware or on your software?
Where I need to do click. On my
It's
computer,
probably
yeah.
not all that often, but there's a whole interface on the UI side, right, on the web and mobile, which is updated relatively often. So, right, they move at different cycles.
Okay.
They move at different cycles. You can't update firmware as often. I
Right.
think it's annoying for the user, so that's not a great user experience. But you can do things, right, on the mobile app, on the web app, that enhance the experience where, again, it happens seamlessly in the background.
So as you have every year, Christine, I have to ask you, is it a feature that you can put your Fitbit in the laundry machine? And
So
it records between 2,500, 3,000 steps for you?
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because when I actually interviewed with the company, I had just put my Fitbit One into the washer.
Yeah.
I got about
Same here,
2,500
same here.
steps.
Yeah,
As
same
long
here.
as you put it
Same here.
immediately into the dryer, you're good. And you will also get probably around 2,500 extra steps, and your Fitbit will last through.
The dryer
it's not a
gives you less
guarantee.
steps.
The dryer gives you less
Less
steps.
steps.
But it can outlast some pretty heavy beating.
But that answers my second question,
Yes.
because I was thinking, like, with many times you forget your variables, right, in the dryer. Well, went from the laundry machine to the dryer, but one night in a nice light German summer rain was too much for it, right? So it was a missing
Yeah.
dryer afterwards. You gave that answer.
I think my guess is that it can't be submerged in water for too long.
Not too
And
long.
this is something, so you can shower, for example,
Yeah.
with the Flex, right? And that's why a lot of people like it, because they either like to be seen with it or they don't mind it. So the fact that they can wear it 24/7, right? You can wear it in the shower, you can wear it to sleep, it tracks your sleep, you can wear it all day, you can wear it to work out, you can wear it to work, versus a clip-based tracker, which you probably have to take off every time you get changed or you go to bed, but you get the advantage of having it be discreet. It's different for everyone.
So if you're in design thinking water, beer, or wine, right? Think about it.
I am in Maeve's camp here. I think
Oh.
it depends on where you're at.
It doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter. If it's an existing organization, look, if you can start
I'm just
everything.
trying to get a feeling for you guys.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make it
You know,
sense. And
if you
you're not
start-
playing along here. So.
If you start,
Is it water, beer, or wine? Can I have some new panelists, please? No, just
I think you should be thinking about it all. You should be thinking about it all
It
the
needs to be
time.
at the core
and
of what you do.
It should be at the core of what you do. So my background, just for folks in this room, is I was a designer back in the day of product development in apparel, which is a fancy way of saying I was a sweater designer for a long time for mass apparel brands. And when I think back to that experience of being a designer and in creating a garment that goes into the experience of being in a store that is surrounded by marketing and music and smells, it's not that different than I think the way we need to think about design for just people in the enterprise, right? It needs to be constantly top of mind. A really interesting exercise that I went through, I used to work for Ann Taylor, and we had this dynamic where we had Ann Taylor stores and Ann Taylor Loft, both brands cannibalizing each other. What's the difference between these two shoppers at the store? We did a lot of ethnographic research. We went into people's closets. We had them talk about what they bought. And it came down to two really simple statements. The person who shops at Ann Taylor opens her closet and she says, "Who am I going to see today?" The person at Ann Taylor Loft opens her closet and she says, What do I want to be today, and what do I feel today, right? And there are very different ways that you design for those different people, right? It's exactly the same for the enterprise, and we see this with our admins all the time. It's not about pummeling with them with data. It's about giving them an experience that lets them look good in front of their boss, that lets them motivate people by giving them data, by running a challenge within their company. They're very emotional pieces that can be solved by technology.
the
But
guy
design is
guy
not
opens his
fashion.
closet and says, "What's clean?"
But design and fashion, I mean, they're related, but fashion is more temporal.
It depends on how you think about it. So my career, right, I started off in fashion. You have a monthly design cycle that you go off of. I then went into medical devices. It takes you 7 years to do one thing, right? And then you're in tech where I look at it as constant, right?
So you went from beer to
That's
wine.
why I said it's
Beer
all
to wine.
beer to wine. So it's, the design principles behind what you're doing on the consumer or the enterprise are the same, and we should
Very
take
different.
more of what we're doing on the consumer side and apply it to what's happening in the
But
enterprise.
isn't-
last
yeah.
question.
Okay. Sure. Do you want to take some questions from the audience?
Yeah, if you could,
Yeah,
that'd
please.
be great.
Go ahead.
Have you seen any, with the Fitbit, with like healthcare plans, have you seen any companies then turn back to their healthcare companies and negotiate lower rates?
Very interesting that you bring that up. So there's a company, anyone from Aperio in here or know Aperio? Aperio is a tech consultancy here in San Francisco. They have probably around 400 employees. So part of the Affordable Care Act, right?
Making a bet on pre-integrating cloud-based solutions
Yes.
and making it easier and faster to come with the lake. So
Thank you.
not paid for it, but just to know for the background.
So here's a company, relatively small, with the Affordable Care Act rolling out. Their health plan gave them $20,000 to invest in a wellness program, right? So they invested part of that money in bringing Fitbit into the company. They were able to show the results as a part of their total wellness program and Fitbit back to the insurer after a year, and we're able to reduce their premiums by 6%. Right, so you can get it on the premium side. You can get it by people becoming healthier. We see companies like BP, for example, have 80% male, higher than average. They're probably like average age 40, 49 years old. They're working on oil rigs. They have lots of risk factors. Folks who participate in the activity program that they have through Fitbit, which is called Million Steps Challenge, actually reduce their weight risk after a year. So they see those savings there over time, the implied savings over a year. So lots of companies do it lots of different ways. It depends on what end of the spectrum they want to do it on.
So did we
not hire, larger people because it brings down their overall score or brings it up? Is there a danger of that?
I'm not sure of the question.
Well, say
only hire fit
be
people.
Only hire. Oh, I see what you mean. So it's interesting. I mean, I'm sure that Maeve can speak a little bit about this, but when you are working within the healthcare environment at an enterprise, you have people who are sick, who generate the most of your costs, and then you have people who are healthy, who consume very little, which is the majority of your population. We've spent a lot of time and money in this country and as enterprises focusing on making sick people better. There is a real movement towards keeping healthy people healthy.
Since we give those poor Ironman triathletes a chance to work with us for 10 hours, our step count is dramatically up. We don't have a problem anymore. So is there any color coordinating that has been going on? Men in black, women in blue? Or?
How many people have asked that today?
Okay. Do we have time for more questions? Or?
Let's try and do one more.
Yeah, let's see if they kick us out. Please, gentlemen.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you give an enterprise has to be really monolithic, that prevents design changes from really moving quickly. Do you see, or do you anticipate that we'll see more application, or enterprise suites are broken up into smaller chunks and we roll out faster?
Yeah, great question. I'll let you take it, Zia, but I'm really worried about it, that the 500 designers are building things which at a business user come together and they work completely different, right? If I don't like that Twitter lists work different between devices because you use different devices, what does it mean for an enterprise users? But I'll let you answer that.
The short answer is yes. I mean, so you've got, SAP spent $35 billion acquiring SaaS companies in the last 10 years and so on. You've got vertical companies in obviously the HR space with success factors and this and that. You've got Workday on the also in the HR side. So that's happening as kind of small vertical things. The magic to enterprise software is you want the consumer experience to be very simple, but the processes are by definition extremely complex. And the trick is to hide that complexity and still, connect your procurement to your supply chain, to your HR, to this, to that, and all of that stuff is happening in the background. Historically, enterprise software companies expose that stuff too much. The advent of mobile has been huge because it's forced enterprise software companies to look at mobility, look at that screen size. People are wanting to do transactions not in front of a big, huge screen with all the information you can kind of push in there. And somebody mentioned today, design is as much about what you take out as what you put in. And so you see it, startups came and started doing SaaS, and Salesforce did CRM in a certain way, and Oracle and SAP did it. So the movement is moving very quickly. But moving the customers of enterprise software away from their existing deployments to new software is not an easy task. There are people that are using stuff that Oracle and SAP built 20 years ago, I tell you. Okay?
Because the shortcut works.
Well, that's exactly right? I mean, they've built and modified so many pieces of that original ERP system that it would cost them so much money to go change. This is the stuff that people don't realize, right? It's like easy to say, well, SaaS thinking will change all of this and everything will be nice and beautiful. But if you look at the top 500, top 1,000 companies in the world, they've been existing for a long time. They've been using software for a long time. And you can't just easily pull something out and add something. So it is an evolution in that sense, if you will. But it's happening, faster and faster.
Quick advice, Maeve, from your journey with design thinking to anybody here starting to do this. 2-3 tips, tricks, what to do.
I think that it's the constant tension between, making a truly beautiful, engaging user experience and then solving the problems of the enterprise. To your point, these processes are incredibly complex and frankly, very frequently not even recognized as a process. They're very frequently fragmented. So, we've been actually thinking as an organization a lot about how do we structure the team in a way to enable that creativity. So is it too much to ask a designer to both be focused on the enterprise as well as the end user? How do we think about that structural organization to ensure that we are being obsessive about design and the end user experience while still meeting the needs of a rapidly growing enterprise side? So I think it's the constant change and just thinking about structure and constantly reassessing. So I don't know that, similar to yourself, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but our lessons have definitely been that it is a constant tension, and that's probably a good thing, actually.
So last question for you, maybe heretic for the conference, and I'll go all along. Is design thinking a fad, a trend, a fashion thing which we won't talk about in 2 years anymore, or something to stay?
Well, design thinking right now is meaningless. We talk about customer experience design and so on, and what does that mean? It means nothing. It has to be shown in the use of it, and that's the best design. And design should be invisible. You shouldn't even think of, oh, what a great design, because design itself is getting in the way of the experience, and the experience of filling out forms is not a fantastic experience anyway. But also, I would caution about changing design too rapidly. I mean, some of the biggest websites out there, like Craigslist and so on, look like they were designed in 1999, and yet people still love them. People get really upset when you change the design of things, when you change the layout of their favorite supermarket.
But design thinking as a methodology, do you think it's a fashion wave right now that we talk about, or something to stay? Design itself is important.
Design is not going to go away. Obviously, design is important.
The approach, though. The approach is fashion, or the approach is lasting?
I don't know what approach they're talking about.
Okay.
I mean, just to talk about design in these vague terms doesn't tell me anything. So I don't know what these 450 SAP designers
Still don't know. Okay. To catch up later with Dennis, Maeve, is it a fashion trend? Is it a latest Daniel Cree out of Silicon Valley, or something to stay design thinking?
I think it's to stay. I mean, it sounds like this might be a semantics issue, but clearly I think design is very important.
So design.
Oh, well, as somebody who's actually teaching it, no, look, it is. Thank God it's here, because it's changing and it's teaching. It's an approach, first of all. It's a methodology. It's an approach. Yeah. It can be learned. It can be taught. And the more people understand how to build better user-centered products is what that's all about. And you can put it in what. So it's absolutely becoming kind of the predominant methodology or approach or thinking on how to build new products, whether it's experiences of an airline or a software app or your car or whatever it is.
Christine, buzz or something that stays?
I think the word design thinking is probably a buzzword. I think design is always going to be important. It's evolved in many different ways over the last century or so. If any of you took a graphic design class that was very hands-on, I know that I had to cut things with scissors out of paper and design something physically, on a sheet of paper versus Photoshop, Illustrator, what have you. It's evolved over time. Design is always going to be important. We call it design thinking now. It'll be something later, but it'll be important.
Excellent. Thanks to our panel. All of them had a lot of things to say, very smart things. I couldn't have said it. Thanks for you to listen and bearing with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.